The unseen predator of England. December 2020. A chapter of my life began that I could never have anticipated. Seeking financial stability during my apprenticeship, I made a decision that would forever alter the course of my existence. I was moving into a small property on my uncle's farm in southern England. It was a modest dwelling, one up, one down, nestled in the heart of the countryside. But what it lacked in luxury, it made up for in peace and simplicity. The farm was a picture of rural tranquility. It sprawled over rolling hills, dotted with clusters of trees that had stood watch over the land for centuries. Non-profitable livestock, chickens clucking in the yard, rams and goats meandering in the fields, and sheep, fluffy and oblivious, grazing under the open sky, were treated more like pets than farm animals. Their presence added a sense of life and warmth to the place, a stark contrast to the cold, mechanical world I had left behind in the city. My daily life soon fell into a comforting routine. I helped with the livestock, feeding the chickens and goats, ensuring the sheep didn't wander too far. My uncle, a man of the land through and through, taught me the gentle art of caring for these creatures. There was a unique kind of satisfaction in this work, a sense of purpose that I had never found in the concrete jungle of urban life. But it was the nights on the farm that I cherished the most. They were serene, almost ethereal. The only sounds were the rustling of the wind through the trees, the occasional bleat of a sheep, and the soft, distant clucking of chickens settling down for the night. It was during these quiet hours, under a blanket of stars, that I felt a profound connection to the world around me. The farm's peacefulness was a balm to my soul, a stark contrast to the tumultuous year the world was experiencing. In this secluded corner of southern England, time seemed to move differently, as if the farm existed in its own little bubble, untouched by the chaos outside. Little did I know, as I settled into this new life, that beneath the calm surface of farm life, something was stirring, an ancient, unseen presence woven into the very fabric of the land was slowly awakening. And I, blissfully unaware, had just stepped into its realm. The morning dawned like any other on the farm, with the gentle light of the sun spilling over the fields and the air filled with the usual symphony of animal sounds. I was in the midst of my routine, savoring the simplicity of farm life, when my phone vibrated with an unexpected message from my uncle. His words were terse, a stark deviation from his usual demeanor.
Come to the north field now.
A knot of unease tightened in my stomach as I set out towards the field. The usually comforting sounds of the farm seemed muted, as if the land itself was holding its breath. With each step, a sense of dread grew within me, a foreboding feeling that something was terribly wrong. As I approached the north field, the sight that greeted me was beyond comprehension. There, amidst the dew-covered grass, lay one of the sheep, brutally mauled and dismembered. It was a grotesque scene. The animal's wool was stained with crimson, its body torn apart with savage ferocity. Strangely, no meat or wool had been taken, as if the perpetrator had killed for sport rather than sustenance. I stood frozen, unable to tear my eyes away from the horrific sight. My mind struggled to make sense of it. Wild animals, perhaps? But there was something about the viciousness of this attack that didn't fit. It was too deliberate, too cruel. My uncle, usually a pillar of stoic calm, wore a look of grave concern. He surveyed the scene with a furrowed brow, his eyes searching the surrounding landscape as if expecting to find some clue to this senseless violence.
This isn't the work of any animal I know,
he muttered, more to himself than to me. The discovery of the mangled sheep cast a dark shadow over the farm. The idyllic peace I had so cherished was shattered, replaced by a gnawing fear. The nights, once a time of tranquility, now felt oppressive, filled with imagined sounds and unseen threats lurking in the darkness. Sleep became elusive, and when it did come, it was fitful and plagued with nightmares. I found myself jumping at the slightest noise, my mind conjuring images of unseen predators stalking the fields. The farm had transformed in my eyes. What once seemed like a sanctuary now felt like an isolated, vulnerable outpost on the edge of a dark, unfathomable wilderness. As the days passed, a heavy tension hung over the farm. My uncle and I spoke little, each lost in our own troubled thoughts. The other animals, too, seemed affected, their usual behavior replaced by a skittish wariness. The brutal slaying of the sheep was not just an isolated incident. It was a harbinger of something sinister, a malevolent force that had intruded upon our peaceful existence, leaving us to wonder what horror might next befall our once tranquil haven. In the aftermath of the gruesome discovery, my uncle and I found ourselves grappling with the reality of what had occurred. The farm, once a sanctuary, now felt like a stage for some macabre play, with us unwittingly cast in the leading roles. My uncle, a man who had weathered many storms, seemed unusually perturbed. His usual calm demeanor had given way to a restless anxiety. One evening, we sat at the kitchen table, a pot of tea growing cold between us. As we discussed what could have been responsible for such a savage act, we went over the list of usual suspects in the English countryside: foxes, badgers, perhaps even a rogue wolf, though they were thought to be long gone from these parts. But each theory seemed more implausible than the last. None of these creatures were capable of inflicting such carnage, and certainly not without taking meat or wool for sustenance. Seeking outside perspective, we invited a hunter friend over, a man well-versed in the ways of wild animals. Over cups of steaming tea, he listened intently to our account. His initial thought was a stray dog, perhaps driven to madness by hunger or disease. But even he seemed to harbor doubts, his brow furrowing as he mulled over the details.
No dog could do that.
His voice tinged with uncertainty.
Not like this.
The conversation left us with more questions than answers. The suggestion of a stray dog, while somewhat comforting in its normalcy, failed to explain the brutality of the attack, the precise savagery of it. My nights became restless, filled with uneasy dreams and a lingering sense of dread. The wind whistling through the trees sounded like whispers, as if the land itself was trying to convey a message, a warning. In those long, sleepless nights, I found myself staring out the window, half expecting to see some shadowy figure lurking in the darkness. The rolling hills and fields, once a source of beauty and tranquility, now seemed to hide unknown dangers, secrets buried deep within their silent embrace. Each morning brought a sense of relief, yet the fear remained, a constant companion. My uncle, too, seemed changed. The lines on his face seemed deeper, his eyes often distant, lost in thought. We both knew, though unspoken, that the peace we had known was shattered, replaced by an unsettling awareness that we were not alone, that something inexplicable and terrifying had made its presence known on our peaceful farm. Weeks slipped by, each day a mirror of the one before, clouded by an unease that clung to the farm like morning fog. We had started to hope, perhaps foolishly, that the brutal death of the sheep had been an isolated incident, a dark anomaly in our otherwise peaceful existence. But that fragile hope was shattered one grisly morning. I remember the day vividly. The way the morning air felt heavy, as though charged with an impending storm. My uncle's shout from the field broke the stillness, a sound laden with distress. Hurrying outside, my heart sank as I approached the scene. There, in the midst of the field, lay one of our strongest rams, a majestic creature in life, now reduced to a grotesque display of savagery. The brutality of the attack was unmistakable, the injuries inflicted suggesting a predator of considerable size and strength. The ram, known for its power and resilience, had been overpowered with terrifying ease. The shock of this second attack sent ripples of fear through the very bones of the farm. My uncle, his face a mask of grim determination, decided to increase our security measures. We installed motion-activated lights around the property, their bright beams cutting through the night in an attempt to ward off whatever lurked in the darkness. Nature cameras were set up in strategic locations, silent sentinels waiting to capture any hint of movement, any clues as to what was haunting our land. Yet, despite these precautions, the attacks ceased as suddenly as they had begun. No further evidence of the predator was found, leaving us in a state of limbo. The cameras captured nothing but the windswept fields and the occasional curious animal inspecting the new devices. But the absence of further violence did little to ease our minds. Instead, it added to the growing tension, the feeling of being watched, of being preyed upon by unseen eyes. Nights on the farm were no longer serene. They were fraught with imagined sounds, the slightest rustle outside sending a jolt of fear through my veins. I would lie awake, staring into the darkness, my mind racing with possibilities. What kind of creature could inflict such carnage? Why had it come to our farm? And most disturbingly, when would it strike again? My uncle, once a pillar of strength, grew more withdrawn, his eyes often distant, as if searching the horizon for answers that refused to reveal themselves. The farm, our home, had become a place of uncertainty and fear, a stark contrast to the haven it once was. We were trapped in a nightmare, the threat invisible yet palpable, a dark presence that lingered just beyond the reach of our lights, waiting in the shadows. The night was moonless, a cloak of darkness draped over the farm, when I was jolted awake by a sound that curdled my blood. An animal's scream, raw and filled with terror, echoing from the fields. It was a sound that spoke of life ending in the most horrific manner imaginable. Before I could fully grasp the situation, my uncle burst into my room, his face etched with grim determination. In his hands, he clutched a shotgun, an ominous sign of the severity of the situation.
Get dressed.
He said, his voice low and urgent.
We need to check what's going on.
Clad in haste, my heart pounding in my chest, I followed him out into the oppressive darkness of the night. The absence of the moon rendered the world around us almost impenetrable to sight, a void where imagination filled the gaps with unseen horrors. We moved swiftly, guided by my uncle's flashlight, its beam a feeble island of light in an ocean of black. Each shadow seemed to dance and shift, concealing unknown dangers, each rustle of the wind a whisper of a lurking predator. The scream had ceased, leaving behind a heavy silence that seemed to press down upon us. We tread carefully, senses heightened, the weight of the shotgun in my uncle's hands a stark reminder of the potential danger we faced. As we neared the location of the scream, a sense of dread grew within me. What would we find? What creature lurked in these fields, turning our haven into a hunting ground? The darkness seemed to close in around us, a tangible presence that watched and waited with bated breath. The uncertainty, the fear, was almost worse than the potential confrontation. Each step felt like a descent into a nightmare, a journey into the heart of darkness that lay hidden beneath the serene exterior of our farm. This was no longer the place I had come to know and love. It had transformed into a stage for some primal, ancient drama in which we were unwilling participants, a play of life and death under the cover of the moonless night. The night had fallen with a suffocating stillness, the kind that preludes storms or other natural tumults. It was then that the unsettling peace was shattered by a sound that sent a chill down my spine, a distress call from one of the sheep. My uncle and I exchanged a glance, a wordless agreement, and within moments we were sprinting through the field, the beam of a single flashlight cutting a narrow path through the oppressive darkness. As we ran towards the sound, the tension was palpable, our breaths coming in short, sharp gasps. Suddenly, as abruptly as it had started, the noise ceased, plunging us into a silence that was almost more terrifying. We stood there, in the middle of the field, hearts pounding. The beam of the flashlight our only anchor in the impenetrable blackness. We resumed our search with a sense of foreboding, and it wasn't long before we stumbled upon a scene that would haunt me for the rest of my days. There, illuminated by the shaky light, lay another sheep, its body torn apart with a violence that was beyond comprehension. Again, no meat had been taken, the act seemingly one of pure malice. As we stood there, shocked and numb, a screeching roar pierced the night, a sound so primal and terrifying that it seemed to freeze the very blood in our veins. It was close, too close, and its origin was shrouded in the darkness that enveloped us. Panic surged as we heard something large moving through the field, the sound of heavy breathing and the rustle of grass underfoot circling us. My uncle's hand tightened on the flashlight, the only feeble barrier between us and whatever nightmare lurked in the shadows. Then, another scream, a sound so chilling and unearthly that it spurred us into action.
Run!
My uncle shouted, and we turned, fleeing through the dark field. The nightmare at our heels. Every rustle, every shadow seemed to be the creature chasing us, hurting us like prey. The sprint to the house was a blur of terror and adrenaline. I could hear it, whatever it was, just behind us. Its presence an impressive weight on my back. The field seemed endless, a dark maze with no escape. Finally, we burst onto the porch, grasping for breath, our hearts racing. My uncle turned, shining the flashlight into the darkness. But there was nothing there. The morning after our harrowing encounter, with the memory of terror still fresh, my uncle made the call to the police. They arrived with a solemn air, their faces etched with a mix of skepticism and concern. As they surveyed the remains of the sheep, their expressions shifted subtly, the initial disbelief giving way to a dawning realization that something truly inexplicable was happening on our farm. They combed the area, searching for any evidence, any clue that could shed light on the perpetrator of such violence. But the land yielded no secrets, no tracks, no signs of struggle, nothing but the torn carcass of the sheep. It was as if the creature responsible had vanished into thin air, leaving behind only the aftermath of its brutality. Later that day, news arrived that chilled us to the bone. A similar attack had occurred on a neighboring farm. The details were eerily familiar. Livestock killed, their bodies mutilated, no evidence of the predator. The community, once peaceful and close-knit group, was now united by a growing sense of fear and unease. Speculations ran rampant. Was it a wild animal, perhaps a creature previously thought extinct or unknown to these parts? Or something else, something more sinister? Theories abounded, each more outlandish than the last, but none brought us any closer to the truth. I found myself wrestling with the reality of our situation. The farm, my refuge from the world, had become the epicenter of a nightmare. The possibility of a dangerous creature lurking in the shadows, its nature and motives unknown, was a source of constant anxiety. The fields and woods around us, once a source of beauty and solace, now seemed to harbor hidden threats. Nights were the worst. Lying in bed, the darkness outside felt oppressive, a tangible reminder of our vulnerability. Every sound seemed magnified, every rustle of the wind a potential herald of another attack. Sleep, when it came, was fitful and filled with unsettling dreams. The sense of being watched, of being prey in our own home, was unbearable. We were no longer the masters of our domain. We were intruders in a land that belonged to something else, something unseen and malevolent. The community's alarm was a cold comfort. It confirmed that we were not alone in our fear, but it also meant that the terror was spreading, a shadow of creeping over the land we loved. The days passed in a haze of apprehension and sleepless nights. The once familiar landscape was now a map of potential dangers, each corner and shadow a hiding place for the unseen terror that had invaded our lives. The farm, our haven, had become a place of dread, a stage for a silent, unseen predator that struck without warning, leaving only death and unanswered questions in its wake. As the days melded into weeks, life on the farm trudged on, each moment tinged with an undercurrent of fear and vigilance. The routines of farm work, once a source of comfort and simplicity, were now performed with a heightened sense of awareness, an ever-present gaze over the shoulder, a constant listen for the abnormal in the orchestra of rural sounds. In the quiet moments, I found myself reflecting on the incidents, turning them over in my mind like puzzle pieces that refused to fit. The unexplained nature of the attacks gnawed at me, an itch that couldn't be scratched. The absence of answers was more unsettling than the presence of danger. Inexplicable, unseen, the predator had instilled in us a profound sense of vulnerability, a reminder of how little control we truly had. Even the landscape seemed to have changed. The rolling hills, the sprawling fields, the dense patches of woodland, they all wore a different guise now. They were no longer just the backdrop of our daily lives, but a canvas on which an unknown terror painted in strokes of violence and mystery. The beauty of the countryside, once so pure and inviting, now held a hint of menace, a whisper of hidden dangers lurking just out of sight. The community, too, was altered. Conversations were hushed, eyes darting, as people shared their theories and fears. We were united not just by our shared livelihoods, but by a collective unease, a communal trespass into a world of uncertainty and apprehension. The attacks, though few, had sown seeds of doubt and suspicion, turning neighborly glances into questioning stares. Sleep brought little respite. It was fraught with restless turns and unsettling dreams, where shadows morphed into beasts and every sound was a potential herald of doom. The safety of daylight brought only marginal relief. The sun's rays seemed to mock our plight, shining brightly over a land that harbored such darkness. In these moments of solitude, amidst the ceaseless tasks of the farm, I pondered our situation. Were we ever truly safe? Or had we simply been blissfully ignorant of the dangers that surrounded us? The farm, a heaven of serenity and tradition, had become a reminder of how fragile our existence was, how quickly our sense of normalcy could be shattered by forces beyond our understanding. As I tended to the animals, their innocent, untroubled eyes looking back at me, I couldn't help but feel a sense of responsibility. We had brought them into this uncertainty, this unseen threat that prowled our land. Their continued tranquility amidst the chaos was a small comfort, a sliver of normalcy in a world that had been turned upside down. Living with the unknown, with the unexplainable, was a challenge that weighed heavily on us all. Each day was a testament of our resilience, a quiet act of defiance against the fear that sought to engulf us. But beneath the surface of our daily toil, the question remained, haunting our every step. What lurked in the shadows of our once peaceful farm? And when would it reveal itself again? Years have passed since those harrowing days on the farm, a chapter of my life that seems now like a distant, unsettling dream. The attacks, those inexplicable incidents of terror, never occurred again. They ceased as suddenly as they had begun, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and haunting memories. I am no longer the person who walked those fields and slept under that roof, constantly shadowed by fear and uncertainty. Time and distance had given me a new perspective, a life removed from the constant vigilance that once consumed my every waking moment. The farm, with all its memories and mysteries, is now just a part of my past. My uncle, the stoic guardian of our family land, eventually retired and sold the farm. It was a bittersweet farewell, a closing of a significant chapter in both our lives. The farm had been more than just a piece of land. It was a legacy, a holder of memories both joyous and terrifying. Now, older and far removed from those days, I often find myself reflecting on that time. The fear, once a palpable, ever-present force, had faded into a lingering unease whenever my thoughts drift back to those events. I wonder about what it was that hunted us, that brought such fear into our lives. Was it some undiscovered creature, a relic of a forgotten past, or something else entirely beyond the realm of our understanding? The answers, I fear, will forever elude me. The mystery of those attacks will remain just that, a mystery, a shadowy chapter in the story of my life. It taught me about the fragility of our existence, the thin veil that separates the known from the unknown, the seen from the unseen. As I move through life, the memories of the farm and its unseen terror have become a part of me, a reminder of a time when the boundary between reality and nightmare blurred. They have shaped me in ways I am still discovering, instilling in me a respect for the unknown, for the mysteries that lie just beyond the edge of our understanding. In quiet moments, I sometimes catch myself gazing into the dark, feeling the echo of that old, familiar thrill of fear, wondering what lies hidden in the shadows of the world. But these moments pass, and I am once again grounded in the reality of my present life, far from the fields and woods of the farm. The farm and its mysteries are now just whispers of the past, a haunting melody that plays softly in the background of my life. But they will always be there, a part of me, a reminder of a time when fear walked the land, and the line between the known and the unknown was terrifyingly thin.